I love that sentence, and you should keep it in mind when we go through that deck, because I believe strongly, go where you're treated best. I actually stole that sentence, as you can see, but I really, really like it. The thing is, if it is about change, we stick to a default mentality. And this is actually where I grew up and used to live for some time, a small German village. And it's actually funny because my family lived there since a long, long time. They used to live in that fancy building here since the 1700 or so. I can also reveal that they totally lost that, everything, in the 1960s. Actually, they don't have that anymore. But on the other hand side, it is fascinating because this is what happened to that town. It still exists, but the surrounding actually were removed by coal miners. And it is interesting that my family still likes to live there, that they don't want to change. We could argue, and if they're happy with that, it's totally fine. But it's super surprising that we stick to default mentality and that we don't want to move. Because I heard before, how many of you are still sitting in the same seat? And I was one of the persons who actually was sitting in the same seat and was like, shit, I'm sticking to the default mentality as well. While on the other hand side, even it is super simple. If we would just buy a ticket and for 500 bucks, we could probably fly to the other side of the world. Some people actually even minimize that and they go really close and narrow in distance, so they don't even expand that. While on the other hand side, in the past, this is a picture from some settlers in the US. It is interesting because those settlers actually moved towards something. They couldn't probably define exactly what it is, but they moved towards something, even if it was really fuzzy and full of ambiguity. I'm not sure in that talk, by the way, if the US, because at one point in time I also wanted to move to the US, Silicon Valley is the greatest place in the world, everything is possible, etc., etc. And when it comes to stability, we have all experienced that in 2008. Lehman Brothers, you know the story and what happened there, right? So it's probably not always the safest and coolest and most growth-oriented place because things like that happened there. While, on the other hand side, do you have a feel where this is actually taken from? It's a lot of ATM machines. Somewhere in Asia, Japan. Let me give you that hint. It is Singapore. And the interesting part is, even in 2017, about 8 banks in the US, they shut down. While in Singapore, no bank so far actually shut down. There's a second myth besides the default mentality. Maybe some of you have read magazines like Monocle magazine, which always announces the greatest place to live in the world with a ranking 1 to 10. And I actually say their ranking is actually bullshit because that #1 place, best place in the world, doesn't exist. And the reason for that is, how do we actually define that? Is that where your family gets educated? Is that the best place actually to live? Is that the best place to build your business? Is that the best place to actually find work? Probably all of those criteria are very, very different. So that's the most important part. And I encourage you to think about that because I said, go wherever you're treated best. And it's up to you to set the priority where you want to define that. You're still messing with the technology part, right? I promise you that's popping up in a second. Just to show you some statistics, like one of the sessions that I did last year already was around the move from that stock image person, like long-term employee, towards a real person, real picture. We are heading towards that young gentleman. It's a friend of mine. And he's a super freelancer. He actually built a couple of companies. They weren't located at one place. He was traveling around with his remote team. Some of them were somewhere else in the world, etc. And he builds that company basically and runs it out of his pocket wherever he is at right now. And I backed that up with some statistics last year, like what's the reason for that? Average internet speed is actually increasing, flight costs are going down, funny things like the current marital status is actually going down in the US. So there's a reason why there's a shift for people that actually move from one place to another and live actually a nomad life. But this time I want to push that a little further, because I said, how do we run a global business out of your own pocket? And there's the concept of the so-called Perpetual Traveller. Actually, that young gentleman, Harry D. Schultz, don't compare him with a Starbucks CEO, by the way, which is called Harry Schultz. That young gentleman in the 70s wrote a book called What the Prudent Investor Should Know About Switzerland. You can buy it actually quite cheap on eBay or Amazon. I highly recommend to read it. And by the way, there's a subtitle, and other foreign money havens. And a second one, Adam Starchild, that I highly recommend, The New Zealand Immigration Guide, also from the 70s and 60s. I like that picture, it's really cool, it's really cool. And those people actually coined the term Perpetual Traveller because it's actually taking that nomad approach to an extreme. Because the Perpetual Traveller idea proposes that individuals live in such a way that they're not considered a legal resident of any of the countries in which they spend time or operate. The thing is, we all have now something in mind, like the Panama Papers, totally shady stuff, right? The funny fact is, if you actually look a little bit deeper into it, if you want to open a small and medium enterprise currently, and you're not from the US, sorry, and you actually want to go to the US, you can go to Delaware, for example, you can open your company, you get a tax benefit, and nobody complains from US government about it. While, as US citizen, you could now, no, as US citizen, actually not, that's a bad example, but we could also go to the UK and go to Jersey or the Isle of Man and actually create a company that gives us tax benefits, and it's totally promoted by the UK government. So that's a strange thing. While on the one hand side, a country like the US is blaming Apple for paying zero taxes and wants that money back, while we still have that possibility somehow to actually run businesses in their country. So just for your mind, I'm not I'm not pushing ethical questions in here, but it is actually quite strange that something like that exists. Harry Schultz even pushed it further, and he created the terminology, the free flag theory, because you could actually decide where you have your passport and citizenship, your business base, and playgrounds. So those are three different things. It doesn't necessarily mean that if you have, like, let's say a German passport, that you actually run your business out of Germany, or that you are living in, have a German passport, and you might actually live in one of the playgrounds on a nice funky island. So this is the thing that he stated out as a free flag theory, because you can put your flag, if you have like a map, wherever you actually want. This was extended later on by W.G. Hill, who added two more flags, which were basically about asset management, repository, and a residency. And currently, at this current state, it is 10 plus 4 flags that you could actually put on a map. I will read them out quite quickly. A good citizenship in a country where foreign income is not taxed, permanent stay in a tax haven, a good place to do business and your income, good bank accounts, assets in selected countries, good marketplaces where you can buy cheap, distribute online company structure in good countries, medicine tourism, outsource employees' work processes for your company to good countries, insurances, and privacy solutions. So now the tech, reveal of the tech. Because I actually picked, and why does it say, by the way, +4? Sorry. If you have a family, there might be different flags that you could also put, like when it comes to education, etc. You might put your flag into a country that actually deserves or feeds best to your children. But let's go a little bit into detail, because I dealt a lot with ultra high net worth individuals. So if you are interested in wealth management, these are typically people who have 20, 30 million cash on site. And if you now think about those flags before, you think like, oh yeah, those people exactly, sorry for taking a woman here, it would rather be, unfortunately, a guy by statistics. They actually live that lifestyle, they live in Monaco or whatever, and they actually put those flags. Now the interesting part. The interesting part is this gets heavily commoditized. So we, as I assume, probably not ultra high net worth, we can benefit of that as well through technology. And let's have a look, because there's a strategy on that you could execute, and it's called the EKG formula. So E stands for enhance your personal freedom. If you actually have fulfilled that, like living overseas, second passport, digital privacy, socializing overseas, if you're single, personal happiness, etc., then move to keep more of your money, and then in the end, you grow your money. It's a very basic strategy. And everybody of us can actually do so. So let's have a look at some of the flags and the possibilities that you have right now. So the first one is good bank account. I didn't look into all 14 actually, 10 plus 4. I only picked a couple, and let's start with good bank accounts, assets in selected countries. Again, the super difficult question, what kind of city is that? All right, it's Singapore again, and it is actually known that Singapore is interesting if you actually want to have a bank account, but it is still super, super difficult. They're quite picky on actually whom they accept as a customer for a bank account. So if you want to build a company or a startup, opening something there is actually quite tricky still. Used to be easier a couple of years back, but they're quite restrictive on those possibilities, even if it's an interesting country for that. Do you have a feel what this country actually, what this city is or country? Let's stick with a country first. It's not Estonia, no. It's Georgia, exactly. Nice Georgian flag. Why is Georgia interesting when it comes to opening a bank account? But we could fly there, and we could actually put $20 in not all of the banks, but in most of the banks, $20 on the table, and they would actually give us a bank account there. The interesting part is that when it comes to interest rate, they actually give you 2 to 3% interest rate if you deposit euro there. I suppose most of us are Europeans, and you know the current savings rate, if you put money on a bank account, not as good. So here you have that possibility still to get a better interest rate. While on the other hand side, if you deposit money there, you have actually currently between 8 and 11% of interest rate in Georgia, with a current inflation rate of 2.9%. That's actually strange when you look at a country like Georgia, which is on the rise, actually has that offer. You've probably done that. If you go to a bank account, it's called Know Your Customer. It's all those large things that you have to fill out for anti-money laundering. Then there are regulations like GDPR, which is great because you can basically by that give allowance and switch from one bank to another within Europe. So all of that sounds like great. It might be, but on the other hand side, also the government could actually demand access to that and could know about your financial details. So if you fancy that, totally fine. I'm saying, and here we see a huge list of countries who actually fall under that law and the US law called FATCA. And they basically give the data to the government if they really force them and they sign bad those contracts, etc. So you even have the Bahamas and Bahrain and a couple of others in there, Cook Islands, that you probably wouldn't have expected. Yeah, that's by the way, I already said that that's the interest rate throughout time from 2008 or so to the current moment. So you see actually that it is obviously moving. But in comparison, this is just like the interest rate from German banks. Nobody's actually using those, which are with 0.68%. Most of the banks are currently in Germany at 0.01% interest rate in comparison to the 2 to 3% in Georgia. So what I'm saying here is this is the current inflation rate in Germany, 1.6%. It's actually quite okay, but you're basically losing money. If you do that, you're losing money, right? And this is interesting because at a talk that I lately gave, there were a couple of people from Georgian banks there. And they do have now, in Europe, we have a challenger bank or neobank called Revolut or N26. You have it in Italy as well, Revolut from the UK, you probably know. And they do have a similar offering like a digital bank from one of the large banks. Super interesting, but they were surprised when I said, you don't know what kind of asset you actually have to offer towards a global audience, because why don't you actually offer that through digital to the outside world as well? So, as a second tip, this is Hong Kong. I'm not playing the game anymore. In Hong Kong, it's the same thing. Like 20, 30 years back, you could probably lift your wired phone, in that case, probably. And you could say, hey, Hong Kong, I want to open a bank account for my business. And they actually did that more or less easy. While this was getting tougher and tougher during the last couple years. And there's currently a shift happening. And that shift is actually quite interesting because they allow now, and you can, if you now go to any app store, you could just download this application called Neat. And with Neat, you can actually set up your business bank account in Hong Kong, and you can actually run a global business by that because you can pay salaries to other countries as well. You can do receipts, etc., through that bank account. Currently, because they did a change in the regulation, 29 banks actually applied in Hong Kong to actually come up with a similar solution. So this is Neat Business. This is a business account. They do the receipts for you. They do the automatical Stripe, PayPal, and Amazon integration if you run an online business or things like that. And you can basically start your business account there. So I covered where you actually have your savings account with Georgia as one example. I actually covered where you could run your business account. I can actually tell you now, so what about assets in selected countries? I was asked that before on a blockchain conversation, like, hey, Axel, why do you actually trust blockchain technology, et cetera, et cetera? And I actually said, there are a couple of countries who actually run into inflation. This is Venezuela at the current, well, not current, like 2 weeks old, that picture, I think. So the question is, where should you put actually your assets for your business? And there are two companies I recommend. And again, go to the App Store. You can actually download Bullion Vault. They store gold, physical gold for you from your pocket into gold that is actually stored in vaults in Singapore, in Switzerland, as well as in Liechtenstein. And you can decide where to actually put it. You get a nice picture every month of your current asset with a certificate that it's still there, etc. And you can store it there. I mentioned Silver Bullion there. We don't have an app so far, unfortunately. But it is interesting because Bullion Vault is a UK company. So if I would put actually my tinfoil hat on and be a little bit overreacting when it comes to what if some government actually doesn't allow gold anymore, that you have access, that they actually shut down that company, that could be an issue because Silver Bullion is a Singaporean company with a high investment and a lot of services actually built upon them, and you can store your gold through silver bullion in Singapore at the current moment. So this is an interesting twist as well. If you believe in things like gold from a stability standpoint, another app for you, as I said, nearly everything can be done by an app. We have Glint, and Glint actually makes it happen for you to actually get a MasterCard, and you actually pay with physical gold hooked up to your MasterCard. And it was recommended by both magazines, Financial Times, The Times, etc. If you want to play with that, there are other possibilities that you get a credit card from 10x, currently only in the UK, and it's hooked up to a cryptocurrency or multiple cryptocurrency. So instead of paying with fiat currencies, you can currently pay with cryptocurrencies immediately. That was the first flag. The second one, a good place to do business and your income. I stated out yesterday evening, and I did that like 2 years ago. I actually started to become an Estonian e-resident 2 years ago. So you basically pay, it's a question, do you want to actually run a global business in Estonia? You actually pay them 100 bucks right from your computer, and it takes about, back then it was faster, 4 weeks, and you received actually the e-residency. You're not allowed to vote in Estonia, but you're actually allowed to do a couple of other things right from your laptop, wherever you are. Like, for example, starting a business there. You have to pay some extra fees, like depending on the kind of legal entity you want to have, but you can do that from your laptop, and you can grow your business for a 0% interest rate until, and it's all legal, approved by the German Chancellor, which is also an e-resident in Estonia. You actually can grow your business there with a 0% tax rate, not interest rate. And the thing is, if you want to have a salary out of that, or if you want to pay your employees, you actually have to pay your local country. So it is not tax avoidance. On the other hand side, A, it's cheaper. B, it is on the other hand side great to grow your business. And they started that previously internally for the country, but then they actually realized that they could open that service to the outside world. And it is interesting because if you actually live in Germany and want to start a company, you know that it is super fucking complicated for entrepreneurs. It's not nice. And doing that from your laptop in a short amount of time is actually quite great. And by the way, they predict that by 2025, the government of Estonia is earning 1.8 billion out of that program. So a return of 100 euro for every 1 euro they invested into the program. For a country like Estonia, that's actually not a tiny number, right? Let me play one video for you.
At Leapin, we believe that every freelancer and digital nomad deserves a chance to turn their passion into their profession. Location matters less and less, and people are free to follow their dreams all over the world. Imagine being a Spanish software developer working remotely for a German startup, or being a Brazilian engineer selling your software subscriptions to customers in Asia. But it's hard to be passionate about filing the paperwork, queuing up to deal with all the government officials, or fighting through the multitude of irrational tax regulations along the way. What if you didn't have to worry about any of these hassles? What if you could just flip a switch and get rid of your accountant, bureaucracy, and unfair expenses? Leapin gives you that freedom. Leapin is a smart new solution to start and run your business, accessible online from anywhere in the world. Powered by the Estonian e-residency program, it allows you to establish a company in the EU and get a bank account with a payment card. We'll then take care of all your invoices and bills, prepare your payments, and file your taxes, all within a monthly subscription. We'll only ask for a digital signature when something needs to be approved. With Leapin, you are free to break geographic barriers, access new markets and services, and benefit from secure remote.
And this goes on. What it basically says, for 79 bucks a month in a subscription service, they will open your bank account in Estonia. You don't have to fly out there, they open that for you. They do all your invoicing if you run an e-commerce business or anything similar with a software that they give out to you. And then on top of that, they do your taxes, right, for 79 bucks. And this is supported by the Estonian government. So I'm trying to push you with Autonomous. Autonomous is basically out of the blockchain crypto scene. They make some suggestions actually where you actually can start with company like a Curacao Foundation or Delaware C Corp. And then, here you see that it reduces if you change to a blockchain ready solution. Then it goes into that screen. So in that case, for digital goods, a Hong Kong Limited would be the case. Okay, there's an obstacle. You have to have a fiat bank account on site and basically press plus 3,000 bucks now, adding to the 1,089, and they set that up for you. On top of that, there's another thing, another add-on, because you need to nominee to make it legal, a physical nominee director who actually does the signings, etc. And you pay another 5,000 bucks, set up that company. They do it all for you. Is that new? Probably not, because you could find a shady person somewhere if you trust him, etc. Who does that for you. There are a couple of people who do that. The thing here is if you look at the reviews, if you just do a web search, you will actually figure out how many people were actually quite happy about it. And they do that service for you right from your laptop. So these are things, and I'm pushing you further, hopefully. If you want to set up your company, let me go a little more bananas now, what is actually happening, how you could set up your company. Because there is something called a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization, and this also arose out of a blockchain community. And a DAO is basically a software. It's a digital jurisdiction, and it is a decentralized court system that actually acts on top of contracts, so-called smart contracts, that can be executed by machines. Wow, what did he say there? So what you can do in here, you can actually start immediately your company, get your shareholders in. All of them might have, if you want that, a voting system, so they can actually vote what kind of decision you want to do. You can also decide if it has to be a democracy, then it's probably voting included. If you actually decide that it's a dictatorship, probably no voting or only with one possibility. You can do fundraising and include cryptocurrencies to actually fund it. And you can set up the contracts. And you can, without one centralized company, you can actually crowdsource that and run a company remotely with that. Now the question on top of that, what is the next? Because this is already happening, and I'm showing you that people are using that. Oh, I didn't raise it before. Aragon, I have to read it out, wait a second. They raised within 15 minutes, because they wanted to get funding by the crypto community, within 15 minutes they raised 25 million in the first round for funding. Decentralized. And the next, have you ever heard about, it's a super cheesy name, Decentraland. And it took me quite a while to actually understand it, and I still suffer with that. It is basically this. When they started, you could actually buy a tiny parcel on that map. And this map is actually same as with Bitcoins, it is limited. You can't change it, you can't make it bigger. It is actually regulated how big it is. So people actually bought, that's a nice spot. This should be a street, by the way. I'm going to buy this spot. And by the way, currently, some of those parcels, those little corners, are worth $20,000. So this is how high the price is right now. And what they did, what happened there, is let's say those people, they actually recognized, who are actually you? And I do have this idea, I want to open an online poker. And they actually changed or swapped and sold land so that people actually built some sort of micronations. So they came together to actually grow a business, and they put a cryptocurrency on top so you can invest into it, and you can actually also trade money, etc. But they have like legal entities behind it with contracts, etc., who built that nation for online poker. And I didn't say before that they, doesn't matter which kind of VR, virtual reality devices you have, that this nation is also, reminds me of Cheesy's Second Life, but it's another thing. You can put on your VR goggles and you can go to that nation, because they also have a development kit out there where people actually build physically that nation, and it works in a browser. It works in a VR browser in that case, so it works on any device. As I said, next, right? That's totally bananas, but it is interesting that we actually built a digital nation with all the jurisdictions, with all the possibilities to earn money, totally not dependent to a certain country or place anymore. They now got a couple of partners in, like for example, a company called Next Reality Partners. I didn't know them before. They're one of the biggest VR gaming companies globally, based in South Korea. And the second thing that I didn't know before is that South Korea is actually quite big. Nobody is using here somehow VR, but in South Korea it's quite big by audience. And this company actually said, this is great, we're going to develop content for those nations. Whew. I talked yesterday about the flag on how to outsource employees, work processes, etc. And when we talk about that, we most of the times have in place things like that, like, oh, if you want to outsource like nearshore, offshore, that's like a sweatshop kind of thingy, and which is totally stupid, because a lot of people, doesn't matter in which country, they actually educate themselves, like Google is picking AI talent actually through online platforms, etc., because the people participated in those programs, and it doesn't matter where they actually are. While, on the other hand side, who's telling us that we are not sitting in those countries which probably have lower cost? Why am I saying so? This is, I actually was there in Ubud, Bali, and this is a co-working space. So you can basically go there, and this is what nomads probably do all day. They travel from place to another, from one place to another, and work from different locations because the cost of living is cheaper there. Rome is actually pushing that a little further for about $1,800 a month. You have like a membership card, and you can fly between Miami, Bali, Tokyo, London, San Francisco, and you can actually live in one of their spaces. You can work there. You have a working space for that price. You can do yoga classes as well, etc. for $1,800 and do co-living. So now back to the question, why should we do that? Why should we actually move somewhere else? It's just a basic calculation that I did, and it is without rent. Chiang Mai is actually a very nice place if you've ever been there in Thailand. And in comparison to London, 1,541 euro versus 3,070, excluding rent. If I would now add rent in London, it would grow actually exponentially in comparison. And now the question is, why do we actually not work from here? Why don't we move there? We could still do all the things that I've shown before from there, from a nice sandy beach. I'm not sure about the laptop if you're in the sand, etc. But anyway, how could we actually find work? If you're a freelancer, there are a bunch of platforms where you can actually, if you're coding or if you're a consultant, you can actually work on that remotely. And a lot of my friends come from the coding background. They do something called the Hacker Beach. They travel around the world on some nice beaches with some other people, and they do some coding from there, basically. They earn a shitload of money because that amount of money that they get hourly is high. The cost of living is super low, right? That's an interesting part. So why aren't we actually getting our jobs from that platform? And on the other hand side, I lately did that for an e-commerce business, and I actually wanted to have an analysis for dropshipping. So basically taking products from China and then reselling them on Amazon, and I wanted to figure out actually what would be the right product to resell. And I didn't want to do the analysis myself, so I opened Fiverr, an app that you can also download. I paid $50 in regards of the quality, because a lot of people were in there that had different ratings, and I choose one, and I actually got a perfect analysis of a product that I resold for $50. And you can get designers there, you can get coders there, you can get consultants there. Now the question of quality. They do have a rating there, and who guarantees us with whomever we're actually working if the quality there is great? Because if we take a bunch of people who work for a company, maybe one of them is not as great. Here, I can actually decide, and through a rating, I can actually pick the right people. It's still a question, how do they perform in a team? Yes, I'm aware of that, but it's a great, great opportunity to pick people out of your pocket. The last thing, actually two things, but I've seen that I have 10 minutes left. A good citizenship in a country where foreign income is not taxed. So if you want to actually have a second passport, how do we obtain that? 4 different strategies: the Lucky Sperm Club method, the sit back and relax method, the pay your way in method, and the Fonzie method. Let's focus on the, I think you know what that is. If you're born there, great. In 2 countries, double passport. The sit back and relax method is, for example, you could actually fly out to Panama. You would probably pay $5,000 currently. You have to assure that you are in Panama 3 to 4 days a year, and then over time you might become the Panama citizenship with all its benefits, tax benefits, etc. The thing is, you don't necessarily have to live there afterwards, but you own a second passport with all the rights in there. And $5,000 is actually not that much. The pay your way in method, so let's say you want that immediately, is a little bit more tricky, because, let me read the numbers. Comoros Islands, $60,000, and you would actually achieve a citizenship. Dominica is around 100,000 right now, and Malta is around 1 million of investment. And then you could achieve a second citizenship there. So that's still not commoditized. I think it's still a lot of money. But with a previous method, it's actually quite interesting. Just saying, the Fonzie method, if you're the next super brain, maybe a country fancies you and wants to have you as a citizen, and you get in there for free. Like, for example, I personally think Serbia is super interesting, because what most people don't know is that even in Serbia, you can go to China without a visa, and a couple of other benefits that you don't even have, like in Germany, for example. Medicine tourism. I can highly recommend, for example, there's this hospital in in Thailand. And it's one of the hospitals who has actually international doctors who studied abroad. It's actually quite premium. And if you take a package like that, that's more above 50 years, I'm a little bit below, but anyway, this would be the kind of package that you get as a health package to check like everything. And it costs 1,800 Malaysian ringgit, because we did a switch to another hospital, but anyway. And this is about 327 euro that you pay for that package. As you will get the slides afterwards, this is a little add-on. Some of it is still German. If you want to do dental bridges, dental crowns, or a tummy tuck, and things like that, I actually have a small comparison for you for each individual country where you could actually go. And most of them are, again, do have an application, and you can do an appointment out of your pocket. So, lastly, what kind of companies could we actually build out of that nonsense? For example, and this is true, as I said, this is a dropshipping model. So you basically take some products from China, you buy them on Alibaba, you just take them, They're not designed. You just take them because you did a proper analysis and you resell them on Amazon to a global audience. They store that stuff for you for a fee. They handle the receipts. If people send it back, they handle that as well. And you are basically a reseller with a totally digital workflow. So did anyone earn money with that crap? Yes, that guy. About $1 million. But just doing that, just taking those products and then reselling them. And this is a friend of mine on the right-hand side, early 20s. He lately made his first million within a year, actually with a similar approach. He also has now a dedicated venture capital fund that he built. And on top of that, he also does an online academy with people from all over the world who actually pay for that event to learn about dropshipping and Amazon FBA. Since some of you are designers, I have a last example. And that last example is this one. Does anybody know what this is about? What are we doing? It's actually quite interesting, right? It's a company called Lot 2046, and it's a subscription model. If you go to their Instagram, you will figure out they actually do clothing. It is interesting. No, I will review that later. Wait a second. They do have a basic plan, $49 a month or $99 for a premium model, and you get black clothes. Everything is black. Black shoes, 1 per 6 months, 1 per 12 months, a jacket, 1 per month, socks, like that necklace, once every 12 months. Then the bikini panty, cap, cosmetics. If you're in the premium package, you also get a toothbrush. They get that machine to actually cut your hair. And if you're in the premium package, you also get a black tattoo machine. It was covered by JQ magazine. Why am I pointing that out? It is exactly the model that I described before. It is one person who takes the products from China. He's currently living in LA and Shenzhen. He does private labeling, so they get customized. You get a custom-made messages on each of the products, and he sells them through a subscription model. If we do a proper math, let's assume that he sold a couple of subscriptions because he was covered on Vogue, JQ, and everything else for $49 a month. Wow, it's actually not bad for one person, even if it's 100 or 200 or 300 people. I'm not sure what is Citizen and how many flags he actually planted out of those, but it's now coming back to you. What I'm saying here is this gets commoditized. You can all decide for yourself, depending on the country where you're from, what kind of possibilities you have, what you think is ethical or not, right? This is the whole microcosm, but you can basically do it very, very easy at the current moment. And my assumption is, like within the next 2, 3, 4 years, more companies or more individuals like I've shown will actually act like that and build companies like that. If you work in a large company, as I am, it is interesting because we're talking about competition. We have a competitor, maybe the same pricing, right? So what if you have that team, distributed team, and you could actually cut down cost and all the people would be super happy on a beach. On the other hand side, if you have a tax advantage for competition, wow. I mean, we've seen it if you work in, with companies in Dubai, you don't have an office there, you probably don't have the tax benefit of an office that is also in Dubai, you immediately have a disadvantage, right? And those are definitely the things you should consider. But personally, and that's the closing slide in a second, I think how we work right now is a total outdated model. It doesn't matter if you want to build your own company like a startup or if you work in a larger company that is actually shifting. But it's up to you where you actually put your flags at. So again, go where you're treated best, in my opinion, by this fine gentleman. And if you want to reach out to me, you can definitely do that. And so thank you.